again, and we're going to talk about a population explosion taking place in cities. The first part of this is probably let's not be like Chicago, since we're coming off the heels of the 1871 Chicago fire. One of the big things that we probably mentioned when it came to the Great Chicago Fire, when it came to the spreading of that fire, we know that heat travels by either conduction, convection, or radiation. A lot of those buildings were close together, and then
made out of wood.
The materials was a huge problem.
Yeah.
So, just like any kind of disaster or tragedy, you want to learn to become better from it. So we'll talk about the city populations going up, which is also known as urbanization, that movement from suburban areas, rural areas to urban areas, urban meaning city, rural meaning farms.
Usually looking for jobs.
Yeah.
Farming was a very unreliable source of income. There's so many variables to farmers. Are they getting enough rain?
Right.
Is there the soil fertile enough? Is there a disease or an insect eating the crop?
Famine.
So famine. There's plenty of variables that affect whether a farmer is going to make a decent amount of living.
And since we're bringing up famine, and you talk about a lot of immigrants coming into the United States, when we're looking at the city population going up, a lot of immigrants are coming off the boat, particularly New York City, and that's where they're going to settle.
Yep.
They don't have a lot of money to go and move out to the suburbs just yet. So when we start to look at the building materials, then what we see here that they did that should have been done in Chicago is, you're going to start to see that there's concrete, and then within these buildings itself, I like to refer to them as like the skeleton of the building.
Yep.
You're going to be talking about girders that are made of steel. So when we talk about steel as well into the next chapter, is it the next chapter? Previous chapter.
Previous
we already
chapter.
talked about Carnegie and steel.
Andrew Carnegie.
When you're looking at steel and how steel is becoming
The backbone of America.
there we go, thanks.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a good one.
Mhm.
So steel is going to be in pretty much in high demand as well, because you're going to start to see more and more skyscrapers building up.
And again, thanks to that
Yeah.
Bessemer process, it's cheap, it's easy to make, mass produce it, so it's readily available and it's used to build America. I mean, bridges, skyscrapers that we're going to get into now, it's everywhere.
Now, buildings is still going to be in close proximity if you look right here, but the thing is that the materials are much stronger, much more fire resistant. So,
And New York City, I'm sure you know this.
Yeah.
New York City, if you've ever been to Lower Manhattan, the original area, that's where the streets are close together. But as you get into Midtown, where you get to the grid aspect of the city planning, every 10 or 15 blocks is a fire street.
oh, okay.
It's a double wide street, 34th Street, 42nd Street. They're double wides to prevent the fire from skipping across the street. So it's every 10 or 15 blocks or so.
Something else just made me think of it. I don't know if you brought it up in conversation at one point, but then the other interesting thing is that when you're looking at the building of skyscrapers and the changing of cities, you have all of these huge skyscrapers throughout most cities throughout the United States, but then there'll be one thing resting real below,
Yes.
and it's usually a church.
Yep, I was just thinking Trinity Church.
Right.
It's like you got Wall Street, boom, boom, and then there's a tiny little Trinity Church.
Which, we'll get into religion when it comes to keeping immigrant families together, but, that's just one of those things where you had certain religious backgrounds that wouldn't cave to selling the property to these skyscrapers because it was going up well. So urbanization, we mentioned before, the movement of population from farms to cities. We can also say, there's a lot of movement taking place from Europe, European countries and Asian countries. Due to that influx of immigrants, you get those push-pull factors. Why are immigrants coming here? Opportunities, jobs. If you're looking at a push factor, land was scarce over in Europe. There were difficulties farming.
And you look at cities. One of the original urbanization factors was the factories.
Yes.
And factory work. And now you've got these immigrants coming over, and the factory owners are like, oh, I can pay an immigrant half the salary I'm paying a white-born Native American, not Native American Indian, but the nativists have said, I can pay them half and hire two people for the price of one. All right, you're fired. When we hire the Irish, the Polish, the Jewish, whoever's coming in.
You're talking about very, very cheap labor. That tells you that there's not a lot of laws or regulations existing within a lot of these factories, which we'll get into later on when we'll talk about how children are working into factories. But that's a lot of the things you start to see here. This is considered one of the first skyscrapers in New York City.
I think it's
right?
also the first building with an elevator in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Flatiron Building. I think it's, what is it, Broadway and I forget.
You know what's funny? Because we cover it, when I'm in this section of the city, I have no idea where I am, but then I look up, oh, there it is.
Yep.
And it is kind of cool the way this streets kind of like intersect that way. Yeah, but this is one of your big ones. In 1903, you're talking just over 30 years from the Chicago fire, because again, these things are not necessarily going to go up overnight. When we look then at the building, the skyscrapers that are going up, you also have to think about, well, now how are we going to connect, Long Island and to Manhattan? And you're going to start to see more and more bridges go up.
And I like that you said connect,
Yes.
because Manhattan is an island. And you can only
Forget about that.
You can only fit so many people on an island. So where's the only obvious place to go? Go up.
Right.
And where you take a city square block and you make an 80-story building, you've multiplied your livable space by 80.
And the interesting thing is that when you're looking at structures as well, you look at Long Island, you look at Deer Park. I mean, our tallest building in Deer Park is what, 5-6 stories, if that, probably.
If that.
I mean, throughout Long Island, I don't think you don't have too many
The
tall
tallest
buildings.
building is probably St. Cyril's here.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, the only tall buildings that I'm thinking of that might be nearby here, it might be in like Hop Hog on Betts Highway, 6-7 stories. But again,
There's a hotel
right
over in Colmac, Howard Johnson's.
Right.
It's like 5 or 6 stories. Yeah.
And since we're talking about fires too, one of the things that we probably already addressed in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, fire departments locally need to make sure that they can get to those people in buildings, especially on Long Island. So that's why more of those tower ladder trucks, 90, 95 feet, they make sure that goes up. But again, when you're looking at certain areas, it does tell you about the population. People can't build horizontally anymore. There's just no more space on this small island. So sky's the limit, right? And you know what, before we get to King Kong on there, I mean, the thing that is interesting with these skyscrapers is that now cities want to outdo each other.
Oh, yeah.
I want to be the tallest.
Anything you can do, I can do better.
Right, and higher.
Yep.
And, it's kind of interesting since we're talking about King Kong on the top of the Empire State Building. These skyscrapers or these I guess you could say these scenic views, they almost become like a very nice backdrop for certain movies, TV shows. Anytime Friends is transitioning, you get to see the city skyline, which is always great. You ever go to the Empire State Building?
When I was a kid, yeah.
We went a couple of years ago. It's just awesome. But again, you start to see more of these city skylines. Again, with the Statue of Liberty right there, kind of like hinting in this unit when we're talking about immigration and the population.
Immigrants, there's Ellis Island over here.
Yep. This is a great trip down the Hudson too.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. More and more skyscrapers starting to go up.
Chrysler Building. It's one of my favorite buildings in the city. It always reminds me of Carvel ice cream. Like a Carvel ice cream.
Oh, the cone?
Yeah. Yeah. Just every time.
I will never look at this
Yeah.
the same way. I will never look at it the same way. I wanted to say something about the Empire State Building, but I completely forgot, but whatever. But again, you start to see more and more, the sky's the limit with these things. And then they try to outdo each other at one point. I think the Empire State Building was the tallest, and there was this Twin Towers.
Then the Sears Tower.
Sears Tower.
Now it's the Freedom Tower is the tallest building in the United States right now.
So when we look at building upward, these are tall buildings made with many floors and lightweight steel frame construction. It doesn't get any more simpler than that. And then when it comes to getting from the bottom floor to the top floor, now, what am I thinking of that phrase that goes along with invention? Necessity is the mother of invention. So, then you have the innovation or inventions of elevators, pretty much getting cargo to the top floors.
And the people who built these things, I mean, nuts. The guys, the steel construction workers who are building these skyscrapers, they're doing it without safety nets. They're doing it without hard hats.
I show a harness.
Yeah, I show one video. There's a guy. He was like responsible for heating up the rivets. So he's heating up the rivets in like this fire, and he just picks it up with like a pair of tongs, throws it to somebody else. Who's standing on like a steel girder, catches it in a bucket, takes it out, puts it in, hammer the steel frames together.
I knew it was kind of interesting, and I saw it in one documentary, but then when I saw it in two, I'm like, all right, the Native Americans were the ones who were fearless when it came to working up there.
And they said it was something about they weren't scared of heights.
They weren't.
Yeah. I don't know if it had to do with just, I don't know why.
I would like that DNA.
Yeah.
I mean, whew.
I can't even get into an airplane.
Right. Because the first time I heard it in a documentary, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe. Then I heard it in a couple more, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
They're not afraid of heights. I'm sure there's some sort of
I don't know if it's a
explanation to that. I
biological
have
thing
no
or
idea.
like you said, DNA.
No
idea.
No idea. But when it comes to now, you have these crowded cities. How are you going to get around?
Yep.
More and more people are going to be in spaces. A lot of the cities didn't even have paved roads. You got to remember, they're going from one place to the other by horse and carriage. Imagine what those streets must have smelled like with the horses. So now, how are you going to get around? If we talked about that today, there's bus, there's subway, mass transit. There's all of these things. There's a cab. So streetcars are going to take you to the outlying countryside, into the suburbs. Right? Suburbs, it's Deer Park. You know, these are areas just outside the city. I know, because people think, oh, well, we're not really outside the city because it's about like an hour train ride. We're outside the city. Just because you can't see it, it doesn't necessarily mean you were just outside. The one thing here, you know, when you talk about the building of bridges, I often ask students, you know, which one does this look like? And it's the Brooklyn Bridge. The interesting thing with this is that because, I should have looked at this beforehand, because the builders were going deep below when it came to building these particular bridges, they would come up too fast. Now, the only
I think they're called like Cassians. It was basically like a cup.
Okay.
You ever took a cup in like when you were a kid taking a bath and you put it upside down and the air stays in there? They basically took a building like that, put it in the East River with these people inside of it, pushed it all the way down to the bottom of the East River so they could build the base of the bridge deep into the mud of the East River. And as you're right, these people were they were coming up too fast and getting, was it decompressed?
The bends.
Yeah, the bends.
Which is common with scuba diving.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're scuba diving, you're down at a certain depth. You have to come up slow, mind you. You have to make a safety stop at a certain point, which is just sit there and wait, because there's a lot. You have to pretty much off gas. I'm pretty sure it's the nitrogen or whatever they. But if you come up too fast, then you get the bends. You could die from it.
There's a great documentary. I think they were called the mud hogs, or there's a specific name for the people who went down into the Cassians and built the base of the Brooklyn Bridge.
But the Brooklyn Bridge, I mean, awesome. This is a good place to go for a bike ride because you have the center lane. A lot of people like to walk, run. I mean, it's gorgeous, the view from there. When we're talking about city cars, this is how you're going to get around. Some cities, I know in California, they still have the tracks left over from that.
Downtown Northport still actually has tracks from the trolley that used to run from the Northport train station down to downtown Northport.
Now, since they might know this because it's on Netflix, when you're talking about trolley and you're talking about tracks, there's that one show that has the trolley in the credits, in the opening credits, and it's Full House. A lot of them remember it from there.
I was thinking Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh, nice touch.
Yeah.
Fred Rogers. But then again, there's your Brooklyn Bridge as well. This is also, I mean, I have run across this thing. I've been in a boat below it. I mean, it's beautiful just to experience the city. It's just another way to kind of see Manhattan. And again, more and more of these trolleys are becoming common. Actually, I mean, no, I was going to say San Diego had a train. Yeah, they had a train system, but it's not like more of a trolley. But again, you know, think how cool it is. It just comes by. I mean, if I was a kid, you're probably hopping on this thing, skateboard, you know, like Back to the Future. But again, I mean, this gives you an idea of how busy the city was at this particular time.
And only going to get busier.
Yeah.
Only going to get busier.
We miss anything with this one?
Nope.
I feel like going into Manhattan, going to grab a steak somewhere or something. That's what makes me want to do.
Maybe Franz's.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.